For regular videos on ancient cultures and forgotten civilizations, please subscribe. If you would like to support the channel and become part of our ancient history fan community, visit patreon.com/World of Antiquity. In discussions about the Great Pyramid of Giza, the amazing mathematical features of the structure will sometimes come up. The conversation doesn't always stop with remarks about how well realized the pyramid shape is, or how straight and accurate its lines are, but might go on to delineate special mathematical formulas embodied in the design, which sound absolutely astounding. We're going to talk about the magic math of the Great Pyramid in this episode, to see if there is more there than meets the eye. Welcome to the Myths of Ancient History series, in which I, an everyday ancient history teacher, respond to popular claims that purport to reveal truths about the ancient past, but which do not hold up under scrutiny. For this review of the architectural math of the Great Pyramid, I'm going to look at a segment from a new alternative history documentary called Back to BAM. It's a sequel to a documentary called BAM that was released in English last year. BAM stands for Builders of the Ancient Mysteries, and it's a fairly popular film in the ancient alternative history genre. Both films are the brainchild of Patrice Pouillard and were originally made in French. The first film is behind a paywall, but the new one is available to the public. These films generally tread old ground, but there is a section on pyramid numbers that I think is worth addressing. If you want to see the whole documentary, I'll leave a link in the description below the video. And I may return to the BAM videos in the future to consider other parts.
Based on these observations, it seems rational and safer to admit that history simply forgot how and why this pyramid was built, because nothing, absolutely nothing, proves that this pyramid is a tomb.
If you're interested in reviewing the evidence for the pyramids being tombs, please see my video, The True Purpose of the Pyramids.
But if the Great Pyramid is not a tomb, what is it? First, it's a geometrical object with specific proportions, pi and the golden ratio. For example, this dimension divided by this one gives us pi. The visible surface of the Great Pyramid, the four sides, divided by the invisible surface or base, gives us the golden ratio. The visible height divided by pi is equal to the total height multiplied by the squared golden ratio, etc. But for Egyptology, since Egyptians didn't know about these numbers, their mere presence is an accident.
The practice of finding significant numbers in the measurements of the Great Pyramid has its origins in pyramidology. Initially religious, and then pseudoscientific speculations about pyramids, and especially the Great Pyramid, using numerology and geometric measurements to establish that some power higher than the Egyptians made the pyramid, whether that be God or some advanced race or civilization. This goes back to the medieval period and the teachings of various occultist groups, but modern pyramidology is generally thought to have begun with the publication of the book The Great Pyramid, Why Was It Built and Who Built It? By John Taylor in 1859. He claimed to find in the structure of the pyramid all kinds of mathematical truths, which far surpassed the knowledge that the ancient Egyptians had. He's the one who discovered that if you divide the height of the Great Pyramid into twice the side of its base, you arrive at a fairly close approximation of pi. He also is the one that found the golden ratio, phi, in the structure. Technically, we should be calling them pi and phi, but in English, it's become convention to say pi and phi. Taylor surmised that the width of a casing stone, 25 inches, represented the length of one Egyptian cubit, which also happened to be exactly the length of the Earth's axis divided by 400,000. Of course, the casing stones actually have different widths, but Taylor just so happened to choose the correct one, I guess. Even more popular was a book by a Scottish astronomer named Charles Piazzi Smyth, a mammoth 664-page tome titled Our Inheritance in the Great Pyramid, published in 1864. He wrote sequels as well. Smyth showed that if you divide the width of the pyramid by Taylor's cubit length, you arrive at 365, the number of days in a year. Using that assumed cubit, Smyth applied it to every measurable portion of the pyramid, inside and out. to see how many scientific and historical truths he could find. And he found a ton. For example, when the pyramid's height is multiplied by 10 to the 9th power, you get the approximate distance between the Earth and the Sun. He also found ways to arrive at the Earth's mean density, the period of Earth's precession on its axis, the mean surface temperature of the Earth, and other scientific facts that were only discovered recently. His book is a fabulous example of how easily someone with intelligence can manipulate data in such a way as to make it conform to previously held opinions. This is nothing more than sleight of hand, whether intentional or not. When measuring a structure like the Great Pyramid, you're going to come up with an abundance of measurements to play with, right? You can use the ones that you like and discard the other ones. If you have enough patience to juggle them around in various ways, you will easily be able to come up with numbers that will coincide with important figures in the sciences or in history. There are no rules here, and the process is made infinitely easier by the fact that certain measurements of the pyramid have some flexibility. Not everyone has measured them the same. So there's wiggle room, and you can choose whichever measurement suits you. One that isn't mentioned in this particular video, but I have heard recently, is that the Great Pyramid is situated at latitude 29.9792458 north in decimal degrees. And it just so happens that the speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second. Amazing! How is that even possible? The people who built the pyramid must have known the speed of light. But think about that for a moment. The Great Pyramid is large, and it covers more than one latitude. It stretches from 29.980150 latitude to 29.978150 latitude. That means there are roughly 2,000 latitudes to choose from. One of them happened to be the speed of light in meters. And it wasn't the latitude at the apex of the pyramid either. And if latitude didn't work, longitude could have been chosen. And if the speed of light in meters didn't work, then maybe the speed of light in miles or other measurement would work. You see how easy it is to make this work? And there's the problem of using meters in the first place. It's anachronistic. The meter wasn't invented as a unit of measurement until 1795. How then could it have been used in the construction of the pyramid? You're probably wondering at this point, are they going to be arguing that the meter was already known long before the 1700s? Yes, indeed they are.
So you can imagine that bringing up the meter in this context is so surprising that it gets immediately rejected, with the justification that if you work on the numbers, you will always find whatever you want.
On le retrouve notamment en Égypte, sur un certain nombre de blocs qui ont été mesurés avec des pointeurs laser comme celui-là, sur lesquels effectivement on retrouvait le mètre. Pourquoi le mètre se retrouve en récurrence sur certains blocs dans une région du monde et dans une autre?
Let's stop and think for a moment. He's suggesting that the meter was known by the builders of the pyramid because he found several stones that measured a meter on one side or another. He, of course, is leaving out the fact that there are thousands of stones of random sizes. The more different sizes you have, the more likely you'll find a length that you're looking for. This is the same kind of reasoning John Taylor used when he found a 25-inch stone and concluded it was the length of a cubit, even though there were other stones of different lengths. This is not how you demonstrate that the Egyptians measured in meters.
This point brought up in the previous films might be the most problematic because everybody knows the Egyptians knew nothing about metric measurements. Are we really sure? Of course. First, because Egyptians measured in cubits. Second, because the meter was invented in 1795, thousands of years after the Great Pyramid. If the meter was not already determined by our ancestors way before our time, then this is an extraordinary coincidence.
Finding something from before the meter was invented that happens to measure a meter is not that extraordinary.
Close to 2500 BCE, using a measuring system called the royal cubit, supposed to be the measurement from the elbow to the tip of the fingers of a king, the Egyptians built the highest ancient stone building, 440 cubits wide at its base and 280 cubits high.
Yes, the ancient Egyptian royal cubit was probably used in the construction of the pyramid. A number of cubit rods from Egypt have survived until today. But you should know that these rods range in length from 523.5 to 529.2 millimeters, or 20.61 to 20.83 inches. So they were not standardized across Egyptian history. So what was the size of the cubit used for the Great Pyramid? Well, you think it would be a simple matter to measure one of the sides and then divide it by 440, and you'd get your cubit length. The problem is, the sides of the pyramid are not exactly the same length. Okay, so then let's take the average. Well, the average length in some sources is said to be 230.3 meters, in others 230.6 meters. So, getting an exact cubit length is not possible. But we can tell the cubit length was somewhere in the range between 523.4 and 524.1 millimeters.
As we previously mentioned, we note the presence of these two numbers that the Egyptians were not supposed to know.
Ah yes, pi and phi. I almost forgot. I probably should address that. Here's the thing about both of them. Egyptian knowledge of pi and phi, aka the golden ratio, is not impossible. So even if these are baked into the pyramid somehow, that wouldn't prove anything except that the Egyptians knew their math better than we thought. That's it. And in fact, it would seem the Egyptians did know pi. A mathematical document known as the Rind Papyrus shows that the Egyptians were able to calculate the area of a circle by a formula that gave the approximate value of 3.1605 for pi. Not perfect, but they did know of pi. In fact, the Babylonians before them also calculated the area of circles and came up with a value of 3.125 for pi. But it's also possible that the value of pi can be found in the Great Pyramid not by intention, but simply as a byproduct of the construction. If they built the pyramid so that the area of each face would equal the area of a square, the height of which was the height of the pyramid, the base would automatically come out to pi. And Herodotus tells us that the Egyptians told him that is exactly what they did. As for phi, or the golden ratio, there's a great video on it you should check out, which goes into how it can be found all over the place, even in nature, which I'll leave a link to. But the point is, the golden ratio is, like pi, an irrational number. Its digits go on infinitely. 1.61803339, and on it goes. If someone does a calculation and the number comes out to close to that number, you can say it approximates the golden ratio, but if it's a finite number, it's not truly the golden ratio. And because none of our measurements are even precise for the Great Pyramid, you can only have an approximate number. Whether it's the actual golden ratio or just a regular number, you can't know.
3,500 years later in France, the cathedral, church, and castle builders used the keen as a 5-unit measuring system. 5 different units that are organized around the golden ratio, whose sizes may vary from one region to another. French royalty eventually imposed a single measurement, the medieval royal keen. It just happens that the royal medieval cubit, which is part of the keen, has exactly the same length as the royal cubit used for the Great Pyramid 3,500 years earlier.
This section here is based on the idea that the parts of the body are designed according to the golden ratio. And if the medieval cubit was connected to the golden ratio, then the Egyptian cubit must have been. Man, I looked everywhere to find out more information about this medieval keen, and it doesn't show up anywhere. I can find no medieval units named keens, and when you Google the word, nothing shows up. Maybe they have it spelled wrong, but I tried alternate spellings. However, that probably doesn't matter because no one in the Middle Ages knew the size of the cubit used in ancient Egypt to make the Great Pyramid. Also, if body parts do display the golden ratio, and the Egyptians had body parts, then there's nothing extraordinary about their having the golden ratio, is there?
Let's follow this lead. Towards the end of the 17th century, the great Isaac Newton, who demonstrated the existence of gravity, sensed a link between the dimensions of the Great Pyramid and the Earth. 1781, in a book dedicated to the King of France, the mathematician Alexis Jean-Pierre Pocton also brings up a link between the dimensions of the Great Pyramid and the Earth, which has yet to be measured precisely.
I can't think of why they would mention this unless they thought that somehow the testimonies of Isaac Newton and Jean-Pierre Pocton on the Great Pyramid carry authority. Neither man had precise measurements for the Earth or the pyramid. Newton was wrong occasionally, you know. Ask Einstein about that.
1795, the meter is invented. Its value is established at one full rotation of the Earth divided by 40 million. To achieve that, the distance between Dunkirk and Barcelona was precisely measured, which gave us the value of the meter as we know it.
What they don't tell you is that at the time, the measurement they took was imperfect. It did not, in fact, match precisely with the actual meridian arc. But after measurements of the meridian arc improved, they didn't want to change the meter, so they kept it. And that is why the definition of the meter today is no longer connected to the measurement of the Earth. Instead, it is defined as the length of the path traveled by light in a vacuum in 1,299,792,458th of a second. If that seems arbitrary to you, as if they are using the meter to define the meter, that's because it is. It's trying to match the original meter length as closely as possible in a scientific manner. What does that mean? It means that the meter could not have been devised earlier unless we were to assume that the ancients measured the Earth wrong in the exact same way as the French did back in the 1790s.
Such a specific value that it will still take close to 2 more centuries to realize that by chance, the meter shines in on certain enigmatic constructions on our planet built centuries and sometimes millenniums prior.
Again, finding something a meter long before meters were invented is no amazing discovery. I'm sure you could find many things in Egypt an inch long, too.
Although they govern the mathematical relations between the dimensions of the Great Pyramid, these 2 numbers were supposedly unknown to their builders. Then, thousands of years later, French royalty established the use of the same cubit as used in the Great Pyramid.
We don't even know the precise size of the cubit used for the pyramid. If we have only an approximate size, you can't say that any other cubit is exactly the same as it.
The coincidence doesn't stop there. The first coincidence takes place in France, where the royal span linked to the medieval cubit is precisely 20 centimeters. 5 spans is precisely equal to 1 meter, which seems meaningless, but apparently miraculously this connects these 2 measuring systems and brings us to a second coincidence. The medieval cubit is 0.5235 meters, 1/6 of pi.
Wait, so the medieval cubit is related to the meter? That can't be. There's a full explanation for how the meter was devised, and it has nothing to do with the medieval cubit. Anyway, a span was not precisely 20 centimeters. It was around 22 centimeters. As for the medieval cubit being 1/6 of pi, there was never a standard cubit size in Europe. And if it isn't the same as the Egyptian cubit, it's irrelevant.
The third coincidence occurs in Egypt. Just as the royal medieval cubit is the same length as the cubit used in the Great Pyramid, which is 1/6 of pi in meters, with the value attributed to 1 meter, certain dimensional ratios of the Great Pyramid give us pi and the golden ratio, directly readable in meters thousands of years before the meter was defined.
Any measurement system would turn up pi, or the golden ratio. It wouldn't have to be in meters.
The fourth coincidence occurs this time in Bolivia, with again the value attributed to a meter. 8 shaped blocks on the pre-Inca site of Pumapunku are exactly 1 meter long and 1 meter high, with other measurements that are a whole number ratio of a meter.
8 blocks out of how many? Probably a lot. Again, they're measuring hundreds of lengths, looking to find a meter, or a length that is a whole number ratio of a meter. They make it so easy on themselves. And you can do that with feet too, and many other measurement lengths.
The fifth coincidence is in Easter Island, related to the Giza Plateau and many other enigmatic sites from the past on the Great Circle, where once again, because of the value given to a meter, the distance between Easter Island and Giza is 10,000 times the golden ratio in kilometers. 100 times pi in meters, 10 times pi in meters, 10,000 times the golden ratio in kilometers. If the size of the Earth were divided by any other number than 40 million, none of this would have ever existed.
I checked, and the distance from the center of Easter Island to the center of the Great Pyramid is 16,161.5 kilometers. That is only 9,988 times the golden ratio. Somebody's not being very precise.
So what, some people may still ask. To determine the meter, you have to have measured Earth. Who was capable of doing that so long ago? Put all these coincidences together and you get the most enigmatic tomb ever built on the planet.
This BAM video provides an important object lesson. It demonstrates quite clearly how easy it is to dive into an undigested mass of data and emerge with a pattern, which at first glance is so intricately woven together that it's hard to believe it is nothing more than the product of someone's imagination. But when you examine more closely, you find a certain amount of fudging. Instead of letting the data speak for themselves, they mold the facts, consciously or unconsciously, into forms that will support their dogmas. Sir Flinders Petrie once reported that he caught a pyramidologist filing down a stone to make its size conform to one of his theories. Don't be that guy. Anyway, I hope you found something valuable in this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. I hope you'll stick around and check out some other vids. I'll catch you next time. You might like my little e-booklet, Why Ancient History Matters. It's designed to persuade people that the subject is important, even in the modern world. You might also wish to use it to help spread the word. So feel free to share it with someone you know. It's free for anyone who wants it. I've left a link in the description box below the video for you to grab a copy. Catch you later.